So today I am trying to fix a design that I have. So I've been making these leather journal covers that open up with a nice latch here. And then you take a composition notebook and it should be able to slide right in. But you can see I have made it a little too snug where I can get it in, but it is a little bit too tight. But you can get it in. So to make it easier, I'm going to make a new template out of cardboard to make this just slightly bigger. So right now, this is right at 10 1/4 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make one that is 10 1/2 inches, just to give it a little bit of extra wiggle room to make these better. Also, just to be safe, I'm going to add 1/4 of an inch on the long sides. So right now this is at 16 inches, so I'm going to make it 16 1/4 inches. And that extra 1/4 of an inch all the way around should give us enough wiggle room to make the books go in a little bit easier for people. These are still functional, just not as handy as possible. And yes, they will stretch as they're used, so they'll be more and more easy, but just for easiness sakes, going. So now this is just what I use for stencils. You can see I traced out a composition notebook there and then added the extra size that I need, which I added an extra 1/4 of an inch on all sides. I think I'm going to go to an extra 1/2 inch on all sides to make it a little better. So, first step that I'm going to do is I have a cardboard box. This one is a lovely Amazon box. It's nice and big. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut this nice large side off the box. So all that you need is a box cutter. Always cut away from yourself. And I am going to just cut this off. This part doesn't have to be perfect because you just need to get a big enough piece of cardboard to make it for your project. So, first thing I know I need is I need a straight edge. So I'm just going to take this. I'm actually going to move my marble off the table. I use this for setting stuff and for doing tooling. And I have two different cutting surfaces. I have this just cutting board, which is good, and then I also have this self-healing mat. But the self-healing mat it's really old that I have, and it's all warped. Like, this is all raised up right here. So I am just using the regular cutting board until I can get a new one of these. So all that I'm going to do is put my cutting board down, and this is just an old cover that I have on top of this table, and it's just an old junk table underneath, so I don't care if I really go over, but I just want something to make sure I'm not going too much. What I am going to do is I'm going to put a straight edge down, and then take my box cutter, and I am going to cut away from yourself. You always want to cut away from yourself. Whoops. Let me turn this sideways. Move some stuff out of the way so it will fit. Sorry, I need to bump the camera. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try this again. And hold it. And what you need to do when you're holding a ruler is you need to make sure it is down in multiple areas. So you don't want to just hold like this because it'll wobble. That's what happened last time. So I'm just going to move this down a little bit. And when you hold it, you want to hold it, I don't know if you can, with multiple points on there. So I have multiple fingers spread out. Then as I go, I am going to work my hands down the ruler to keep the pressure moving down. So I'm just going to start here at the edge of my map. See how I'm moving my hand and keeping pressure all the way along the ruler so it doesn't move. So that should be a nice straight edge. I have cut all the way through it, but there's ends on either side. There's areas that aren't cut. So that doesn't really matter because that's way longer than what I need. So now I'm just going to cut off the ends. And you always want to start with a fresh blade. I like these utility knives to where if the blade starts getting dull, you can just take it, switch the blade around, and snap it back into place. So now that's a nice fresh knife. So if you ever have troubles and it's fraying the edges, always just switch to this knife. That's why I like these utility knives, and I like these X-Acto knives. And I just buy boxes of the replacement blades, and as soon as they get dull, I change them out. It's a lot easier than having to sharpen the blade. So now that I have this nice straight edge, I need to take a square, and I need to make a nice squared off edge. That's 90 degrees. So I'm lining this up with the paper. I am putting my thumb on the edge and pushing this towards me. So this is on the edge of that, and it's going 90 degrees. So now all that I'm going to do is I'm going to take something to mark with. And I'm going to mark this with a straight edge. So now I know this is perfectly 90 degrees from this right here. Now, as I said, I'm going to make this 16.5 inches. So I'm going to turn it this way, take my straight edge ruler. I am lining this up with the edge. Now, always when you're lining up rulers, you want to make sure you're looking down from it. So I don't know if you can see this if it's in frame, but you need to make sure you can look down and see that this edge is right on this line. So it's always good to be standing or stand up when you do stuff. So I'm going to line it up, stand up, make sure it is perfectly lined up. It is. Now I'm going to come down to this side and make a mark at 16.25. So down here, I made my mark at 16.25. All right. So I have that marked. And then take my square again. Then do the same thing. Take it. Line it up, use my fingers up against the cardboard and push up against it to make sure it's perfect. And then make your mark. So now this is exactly the 16.25 that I want from this point all the way to this point. Now the next thing I need to measure is to make sure on this line that we have, and I forgot the measurement already. Let me just check it again. Yeah, 10.5. So we went 10.5 inches. So I'm just going to take my ruler, line it up with the edge. Make sure you're looking at it from high up so you get it perfect. So 10.5 is right here. Now do the same thing on this side. And whenever you're turning this way, you just put the 10.5 on the edge rather than the 1 like I did on the other side. Makes your life a whole lot easier. And then just make your mark at the end and finish that line going down so you have a nice straight line. Alright. Now, since we have these and they're both measured, we both know they're square, all that we're going to do is we are going to connect this dot and this dot with our straight edge. So I'm lining them up. And now I have that cut, all right? Now I have it drawn out, ready to cut, all right? So, now all that I'm going to do is I am going to take my straight edge, clear some of this stuff out of the way, place it down, and I want to again look at it from above. Line it up just right. So that's right. Hold it. Make sure you have a nice spread weight distribution. My thumb's here, my fingers are here, so it's nice and spread. This thing is not going to move. And then cut, and always cut away from your body. Got a little off track. Doesn't matter, because the ruler's keeping me from going off track in the wrong direction. If it goes off track inward, that's bad. If it goes off track outward, it's okay. You can see right here, this is the little fluff that I miscut, but all that doesn't matter. Make sure it's lined up. You can see there's a little bit that I miscut from going out. And I'm just shaving off little bits that matter. And again, the stencil doesn't have to be perfect, because when we go to actually make the journals, we'll use this, we'll cut out the leather, and then we will trim off any unevenness with the leather, burnish the edges, sand the edges, so all that won't matter, and doesn't matter if it's not perfect. Alright, this side. I know there's better materials for making out of stencils, but since I ship things and buy things a lot, I have an abundance of cardboard. And since I'm a teacher, working on a teacher salary, and I do this mainly as a hobby to make a little extra money, I just do use what I got. So, just lining this up, checking it from above. Start here. Walk my hand down, always keeping pressure on it. Never want to let go completely. That's why I'm holding it with the knife hand, moving my hand down, finishing my cut. So now, this is cut to the size that I want. Now here's the next thing that we need to do. I do not want squared edges. I want a nice rounded edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for my handy dandy quarter, which I seem to have misplaced. I can't find my quarter, but I have a bobbin case. We'll just use that. It'll be nice and easy. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put it down. I'm going to hold, and I am going to draw. And that gives me a nice rounded edge. Do this for all four sides. Again, doesn't have to be perfect, because when we go to the leather, it'll be sanded, it'll be beveled, it will be burnished. But this is just to give us the basic template that we need. A lot of people like making their templates online and printing them out. On cardstock, I like thicker stencils. That's why I use cardboard. But there's nothing wrong with those. Kind of messed up on this one, so I'm just freehanding it. Alright. So now we need to take that X-Acto knife. This is much more nimble than the big utility knife. And it should allow us just to cut along this line. You see, it's not cutting all the way through, so I'm going to go ahead and replace this. So I'll grab and show you how it's done. So, I have an old cup, which I put all of my blades in that are used and old and dull. And before throwing them out, I will put them all in a plastic container, seal it up, tape it shut so no one accidentally gets cut. And then I buy these refillable things, come with 100 blades. You just carefully reach in, grab one. These are very easy. You take it, you unscrew, loosens the blade up. Take your blade, screw it tight. That's all it takes. And now this blade is really sharp. And so now you should see that I just take this and go around, and it's like cutting through nothing. So, I got my corners rounded. Next thing I need to do to mark on this template is where my holes go. See, I have it on here, punched in the middle of where the holes go for my rivets. On these, I was using a 3 rivet system, and I think I'll use that again. I like the look of having 3 rivets there. So what I'm going to do is I am going to find the center point. So, center of 10.5 is 5 1/4. Find that on both sides. 5 1/4. All right, so that's 5 1/4 and 5 1/4. So I'm going to draw a center line going all the way down. So now I know where the center is. Now I like the distance on this one to where I have it as being 1 inch to these two and 1.5 inches to this one. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that. So an inch is right here, 1.5 inches is right here. Now on this right here, I want that to be square to the center line. So I'm just making sure. So right here's where that one's going. And then I want these to be, I forget what my measurement was. 1/2 inch in between them. I'm just going to go 1/4 of an inch on either side of that. So I'm putting it the center line at 1/4 of an inch. And then I'm just going to the 1.5 inch mark right there. This one right here. So now I got my points of where the holes are going to go in. Now to make that happen, I use my hole punch for leather just to punch holes right through it. So I line it up. I take my little hammer. Oops, I forgot. I took the marble away, which I need to use the rest of this table is too flimsy to actually do anything. So we'll take this heavy marble, put it back on the table. We'll try that again. Right through. Not quite through. Helps if I have the self-healing mat on here too. Put it back up. Still not going through. My punch must be getting dull. Which if these things get dull, all that you have to do is just take a file against the surface like this and just go like this and sharpen that back up and it should be fine. There we go. And one more. Sorry that it shakes the table whenever I do that, guys. That one's through, it's just not popping out. There we go. So I have those holes marked in there. And this one's a little bit off, but it doesn't matter because these are just marking the hole placements. And as long as I know where the center line is, I will use a pen when I'm marking my leather to know where to go. And I do not punch holes on both sides because it's not necessary. All that you have to do when you're marking is you take this, and you flip it around, mark it on the other side. So that's how you make the stencil. Now you just need to grab your leather. And for this one, I'm going to use some 4 to 5 ounce natural veg tan leather. Got a nice sheet of it. It's quite big. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set this down. I am going to take my stencil. I am going to set it down. Get it as close to the edge as I can. And this is where having a bigger workspace would be great. I just work in a spare bedroom. Oops. Stay on there. Alright, there we go. Now I'm just going to mark. You always want to mark on the underside Never mark on top. Some people use scratch-alls. I can hardly see those for some reason. I don't know if I'm using them wrong. But I find a nice blue or black pen works really good. So now I'm just going to make these punch marks. Looking at the crosshairs, lining it up inside those holes. So now I have my marks there for that. I'm going to flip it around. Do the same thing on the other side. Lining it up. Don't know if you can see that down there. Nope. Move that like that so you can see it. Crosshair, crosshair, crosshair. So now this is all cut. Now I'm not going to try and cut on that line with this much leather. This is like a half a side right now. So all that I'm going to do is I'm going to take the X-Acto knife, try and get it so you can see on the camera, start at the edge, and I am just going to loosely cut all the way around this. Some people worried about wasting a little bit of leather, but I find the quality that you get from being careful by cutting stuff out in small amounts makes up for the fact that I am wasting a little bit of leather while doing this. Besides, you can just add that extra bit of leather into the cost when trying to calculate how much, this is still about 2 square feet of leather. So if you calculate how much you're spending on leather, and so each one of these is going to be 2 square feet, it doesn't matter if you waste 1/4 of a square foot of leather, because they're still paying for the same amount of leather, no matter if you actually use it or if it's waste. All right. So now we're going to go back to cutting this. Same way that we did with the... Oops, got this marble here again. Again, sorry for the shaking. It's really heavy marble. Alright. So now, got this nice 4 to 5 ounce, I believe, natural veg tan leather. Looks pretty nice, not too many blemishes, a little bit of dirt on there. You can take off with a eraser. So, get my metal straight edge. We're going to do the same thing again. You can see my line of tracing is not perfect, but it doesn't matter, because you just want to find the line that is the closest to being perfect. Or walking my hand down, cutting, keeping pressure on with this hand, walking. See, it didn't quite go through in some places. So I'm just carefully, I'm not pushing at all. When you're cutting, you don't want to be pushing down, because if you're pushing down, you're trying to force it. And when you try and force it, you're more likely to make a mistake. If you have to force it, change your blade. Usually a blade lasts for one job, max. And then you have to either flip it or replace it. Go to the wrong side. Cool. Putting pressure down with my finger. Putting pressure down with my finger. Putting pressure down with my finger. So the only thing that's connecting it is this area right here. when you have pieces like this, yes, it's scrap, but this can be used. All right, there's a lot of people who think, oh, just throw it away. This is good. You can get a nice bit of strap from that. You can get a nice knife holder still from this. If I was going to make a utility knife sheath, you could definitely wet mold this and make it work. So just because it's an offcut doesn't mean you can't save it. Only things I don't save are little tiny pieces like this. There's not much you can do with something like this. It's all messed up on the edge, jagged from being on the edge. So this is stuff that you throw away. Anything else, save it as much as possible. Especially when you get long cuts like this other one I took off. This is perfect for doing lace or anything. So make sure you're keeping all your leather. It's valuable stuff. All right. Now I am going to cut this one. Again, making sure I'm looking from above, not just from below. You want to try and always keep your utility knife at a 90-degree angle when you're cutting so you don't have any weird angles. Most of that is fixable when you are sanding and stuff, but just make your life easier. Try and keep your blade 90 degrees. Now I know they make corner cutters. I don't have any of those, which would make my life a whole lot easier. So again, I'm just going to cut these curves with my X-Acto. Now looking at these, again, I kind of lost the curve when I was cutting. So I'm going to grab something rounded. Let's see, what do I have available besides that bobbin? Because I didn't really like that bobbin being so small. Let me see. We'll use this. And since we made our journal bigger, these bigger curve might actually look a lot better. So you want to leave yourself enough room that you can actually make a mark on the sides. Because if it's only the top edges, it's not going to look good. And when you do the stitching is going to be an even tighter curve than this. And if you do any trimming afterwards and sanding, you want to leave yourself plenty of room to make everything look good. Now, if you're using or you're making a journal cover for a journal that doesn't have rounded corners, you do not want to be putting rounded corners in there because you'll be trying to put something that's rectangular into a rounded corner and it won't fit. You'll have to clip your corners, which isn't that bad, but just makes your life easier if you know what you're building for. I am making these specifically for composition notebooks, which have rounded corners. Again, this is thicker leather, so I'm not trying to force it. I'm going to take many passes rather than push hard and make a mistake. So light drags across the surface of the leather. That way you get a nice, clean cut. And again, these will be sanded down, so if you do make a mistake or something, that'll work. but just to be safe. I have a little sharp point right here and right here. So I'm just going to take this blade, keeping it at 90. And that happens if you're not holding your blade 100% 90 degrees. There we go. Always check, see, I can still feel it right there and right there. So always just feel it. You can feel it better than you can see it a lot of times. And if you need to cut more off. Anywhere you feel a point, it's definitely not rounded. Or it's not rounded, it's not going to look good. I get most of my leather from Springfield Leather or Tandy because I'm in Missouri and those are the physical shops that I have available around me. Again, right here and here. You can kind of see what I'm doing, where I'm just holding the blade 90 degrees and I'm just shaving it off. I'm not trying to be forceful, just shading off anything that's a little sharp. There we go. So now all my corners are marked. I'm going to go ahead and punch these holes. I already showed you how to do it, but I'm going to do it over on something that's not going to shake the table so badly this time. Go over to my heavy duty sewing machine table over here, which is made out of steel, which can definitely take the impact rather than the flimsy table that'll shake everything. Still not quite working. Let me move my marble again. Battery power went low, no longer able to use flash. Sorry if it just got darker. So now I have these punched. So the next step, now that I have this piece of leather is completely ready. Now for the inside leather, which is used to hold the book in place, I use something very thin. So I'm assuming this is a 1 to 2 ounce. It's about 1 millimeter. I don't know how much that equates. But you want something very thin. That way your book doesn't get too thick just from having leather. So I have this nice piece of leather here. Not sure really what it is, but for my purpose, it is going to be the inside of my book cover. So I have a straight edge already cut right here, so I don't need to worry about that. Now I know I like my holders to be about 4.5. So this edge right here is about 4.5, and so I just use this as my measurement. Makes life a lot easier. So just gonna come down here, and I'll line this up with the edge. There's my pen. Make a mark right at the end. Actually, I'll make it about 4 1/4. Just make a mark at the 0. Do the same thing again down here. Now I'm going to take my straight edge. I'm going to line it up with those, oops, I'm always knocking stuff off. Again, too small a workspace. Lined up with those marks. Take my knife. See, this is so thin, this little knife cuts right through it without any problems. And the reason why I'm not too picky on this is that this will be trimmed down when on how I place these on, I should say. So now this is going to be 2 inserts that hold the pages in place. So you can see these are going to go on the inside like that. So this is just about perfect. It's a little bit bigger than the paper on either sides, which is what I want. Now I'm just going to cut this. Go. So now I have 2 inserts. I also have this piece 1 inch that will become my straps. I already have my holes marked on it on one side. And so now this is what I'm going to use for when I put my buckles on and when I put my strap on. So this side will become my buckle and this side over here will become my strap, which I think, I don't know how I want to do it. I got to figure it out, but I might need a little more leather. But anyways, I already have this piece of scrap for making those other ones. So what I do with these, I keep my life very easy. Rather than trying to cut the corners and everything now, I do it later. So all that I'm going to do is take some leather glue. I am going to go around the edges. You just need a little bit, because this is just holding it in place while we sew. Now I know that this and this are straight edge, so I'm just going to place it down I'm going to line it up. Any glue that seeps out is okay because I have one of these erasers that they make for erasing glue and stuff off leather. So now I'm just going to take this and I'm going to start in the middle, work my way out. I'm just putting pressure down, keeping this on that edge, be nice and perfect, and then in about 5 minutes, once the glue sets, then I will trim off the excess. I'll do the same thing on this other side. Again, all about working smarter, not harder. So now, while that's drying, set that off to the side. I'm going to go ahead and work on my straps. So, I use brass colored buckles. And how these work is you just feed this up, you feed it down, and then I put some glue and then I hand stitch right here along this to keep this in place and then glue it down. Some people stitch along the edges, and that's good for if you're using longer straps, but these are so short, it's really not necessary. The glue is strong enough to keep the pieces together for this side. Now on the buckle side, generally yes, I would go ahead and stitch that on the machine. But the glue really for this and these right here are then keeping in place. And really this is as big as you need it for the actual buckle itself. Because if you look at the stencil, the holes are very close. Oops. The holes are very close to the edge. And so what you want is you want this to line up with those holes, and you want the buckle to be on the front cover. You don't want it hanging off the sides. So you want it this side to be pretty short. So something like this. I usually keep it so the holes, so the edge of the rivets are then be right on the edge. So something just like that will work. Now I'm going to go ahead and just take this, hold it down. And I will be putting a rounded edge on this, so I'm just for now cutting that off. So that is our first part of the buckle. Just we'll glue that, and I'll use this as guides for placing holes on this. So this is gonna be my strap. Let me see, is this long enough? I'm thinking that if this was going from the back wrapped around the front, it's going to be awfully close. You only have about that much, and I would like a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and just take this again. This is a 1-inch strip, so it's not too hard to make a 1-inch strip. I'll go ahead and just use this down here in this little area that's probably not going to be used much. I'm going to make a straight edge down at the bottom, something like this. And when your leather starts moving like that as you go to the edge, hold the leather that you're cutting with your finger and cut away from it. You can get a nice straight edge. Okay, so right here is a nice, now just 1 inch. did that. Didn't need to do that. Just gonna cut it with the ruler. With the X-Acto, I mean. So there's this. Alright. Oops. Cut that off. Use this as my guide. Mark my holes. There they are. So now that's good. So now I'm going to go ahead and glue this one. Just make sure it's covered in glue. Oops. Doesn't have to be perfect. But the closer you can get it to perfect, the easier your life will be. Go. And I usually use a little clip to hold it, which I don't know where I put my bag of clips. Oh well, not that big a deal, because really already it's holding. So I'm going to set that off to the side. And now we're going to put these two strips together. First I need to punch these holes. One. Man, not wanting to go through this one. There we go. Time to sharpen my hole punch. Alright, took me a little bit, but these are kind of punched. Alright, so that'll work enough for making my marks. So, just going to glue these two together, and then that'll be the first part of this video. The next part, I will stitch them on my stitching machine, burnish the edges, and call it a day. Glue all over my hands. Try and line them up the best you can. And these will need to be trimmed down because the hole is 1 inch. So you usually got to trim a little bit off each side. That is it for my first part. I'm going to let all the glue dry and then come back when it's dry and finish it up. All right, so we're back. I don't know if this is going to be one or two parts, but what I have done since I left off is I went and bought one of these hole punchers. This one was fairly cheap. Got it on Amazon for about, I think, $7. So I was just struggling with my hole punch. It went dull and I couldn't get it sharpened, even though I said how easy it was. So this is going to make life a whole lot easier. So you can see here I got the hole marks where I kind of struggled making the holes. And all that you have to do is just put it where you want it and squeeze. And you got a nice hole right where you want it. Go ahead and just do the same thing. All of these. So you can see how much quicker that is, and I didn't have to shake the camera. So now this strap, I do have to trim it down because it's uneven. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to first cut this part off right here. And now I'm going to take this, I'm going to fold it, and I'm going to mark it right about there because I want it to be about the same distance. And this doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to be rounding this off. So there's that. Good, nice cut. I'm going to fold it, line it up. Now I'm just going to make my marks where I want my holes. Don't know if you can see that, but there's one there, and one there. Take my hole punch. Trying to make sure it's nice and centered. There we go. Got my holes punched on that one. Now I need to finish punching the holes on this one. 1, 2, 3. So much simpler. Alright, so now I'm going to use something rounded, like this bobbin casing. I'm going to slide it up to the edge of where I want it. So right about there. I'm going to draw my line. And then I'll cut along that line. But I'm going to go ahead and measure on all these before I do so. I forgot I need to trim this one down before I do that. So right now you can see it's a little wide. It won't fit. It's because it's a little bit bigger than 1 inch. And that's because my gluing was not perfect. Alright, so I'm just going to take a straight edge and I am going to trim off a little bit on each side just to make it even. So I'll just do that. And again, I'm not taking off much, but you can see where it's a little bit up on this side. So I'm just trimming off that excess and anywhere that meets in the middle. I'm keeping it the same distance from that edge for the whole thing. And it's really just an eyeball thing because it doesn't have to be exactly perfect. No one's going to notice if it's slightly uneven. You can see I'm not taking much off. I took off this little sliver and this little sliver, just making that edge perfectly straight. can still see a little bit right here I need to do, so I'm just going to scoot it down a little bit and do a little bit more. Just like this. Oops. Such a small area, it's not wanting to cut. Let me try my smaller blade. There we go. Oops, I think I might have cut through my mat. Yep. It's a problem with using something that's not a self-healing. See if I can get it from this side. Make it nice and smooth. Again, I'm going to burnish this so it doesn't really matter that much. But you want it as close to smooth as possible just to make your life easier when you're trying to burnish. There we go. You see, not much different. Just trimmed it down just enough to get the sides even. Alright. Trace this bobbin. It's a little big, actually. Guess I'll make it work. Just using the hole of the bobbin to put it right on that center hole. Putting the hole in the bobbin right on that center hole again. This way it's going to be the same on both sides, and it's exactly the same. Alright. Now I'm going to grab my scissors. Cut these. And if you have one of the strap-in cutters, make your life a little easier. But for this, I'm just going to go around. And I just realized I didn't need to poke those holes. That's still going to be plenty of size, so I'm going to go ahead and trace this. Wasn't thinking straight. I'm cutting on the inside of that line because I want all that pen that I put on there to be taken off. So there we go. That's plenty enough for the strap, even though I made a mistake. And you know, that's the cool thing about it. A lot of times you can fix your mistakes. If you punch a hole in something that's a big sheet of leather, that's something you can't fix. But little things you can often fix. So now I'm just going to cut this one. Getting on the inside of that line. Just tracing around. Making sure it's nice and smooth. So I have this little hump here, and I can still see blue right there, so I went a little bit above the line there. So just going through and smoothing it out. I have a little bump right there. Take that off. All right. So now this is not perfectly rounded, and it's not gonna be. So I'm going to take a bit of sandpaper, and I'm going to smooth it down. Here's my sandpaper. This is a pretty heavy grit, but I just use it just to round off these edges a little bit better. And I am just rolling it on the sandpaper. I'm not pushing, I'm just letting sandpaper do the work. You can see it kind of flattens it out, but it also makes that nice and round. I'm going to do that on these. Nice and rounded. And this is just going to get off any little planks that you might have. You can see it kind of spraying some of the areas that were high. You just want to get those off. You can see like this is still there. Just a few little things. Now it's gone. You just want to make sure you smooth it all out. And you can go down to thinner and thinner grit sandpapers just like you're using wood. But this is all that I need because I'm just going to be burnishing this. Alright, so I have this strap and this strap ready to go. Still got a little high spot right there, I see. Get that corner up a little bit. There we go. Much better. Set those aside. Now we go back to the actual cover itself. We have this extra material. Now that it's dry, we need to trim it off. And so I just take my X-Acto knife, and I'm not pushing or anything, and I'm just dragging it along. And I'm going to go a few times. Just dragging it along until it's cut away. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to be sanding this and making it perfect with that. Alright, so now let's cut this corner the same way. I'm not pushing hard. I am literally just following the curve that we made. I don't want to cut into that curve, so I'm just going nice and slow. So almost there. There we go. Got a little high spot right there. Never cut towards your hands, so if you're going to be pulling towards you, you want to make sure your hand is up, not down here. There we go. That squeak is it actually cutting through the glue. I didn't quite get close enough, so I'm going to go ahead and go over that again. So, go. Get around this curve. we go. Now I'm just going to hit these up with that sandpaper. Just rounding it off. Smoothing it out. So when I go to the next step, be a lot easier. See, this is just glue, and that will come off when we sand it. See, it's already coming off. And if you can't get it off, you can either rub with your finger like this, or you can take one of these rubber erasers sorry to shake everything. See, it just makes it disappear. Got some black stuff on there. Kind of leaving a little bit of residue, but that won't matter. That's good enough. Back to sanding. Okay, so now this has actually raised the edges a little bit, which is good because now we are going to use our edge beveler. So this is this, but I got my wrong. I have a universal tool, which is good. I got it on Amazon. And this tool has different attachments to it. So I'm just going to grab my edge beveler, which is this one. Let's see if I can get it to focus on it. Come on, focus on my hand. Nope. Hello? Takes this little tiny wrench. I'm going to loosen this attachment, which is for when you're hand stitching and you need to give yourself a guide. So unscrew this, take that out, loosen this up more. In there. There we go. Slide it in, tighten it up. There we go. Now we're ready to bevel our edges. Edge beveling is pretty simple. You just go along. Just cut off. You're just rounding this whole book. Straight parts are the easy parts. Corners, you just kind of gotta get a little bit at a time. There we go. And all the way around the outside. I'm going to flip it. Do it all the way around the inside. Thinner, softer leather is sometimes hard to bevel. See little pieces not wanting to come off. Just go ahead and take them off the best you can. It's really not entirely necessary to do that, but if you hold it down right when you start, you can usually get a good one like that. If not, you can do little tiny bevels where you just kind of shave it off a little bit. There we go. This section right here. So there is that. Now this one is ready. Got some stuff. I'm gonna go ahead and cut this black off. I don't like it getting on my project. Go. Let's erasing the glue. See, it starts to ball up and gum up. Take it off and then go again. You want to make sure all the glue is off before you do any kind of finishing, whether you're dyeing or put an antique. It'll just mess everything up if it's not gone. There we go. Nice and gone. There's some more there. Good way to tell if you have glue somewhere, if you can't see it good, add water to your leather. Water will reveal where you have glue and the like on your surface. Everything else will get darker because it's getting wet, but the glue will actually keep that spot from getting wet right away so you can see it. So there's that. Now we're going to bevel these. Again, these are harder to do because it's a softer leather. But you just want to get the best you can. See, I'm kind of holding it and going between my two fingers because if you keep it tight, it doesn't stretch and the beveler will go right through it. Go. Again, not doing much, but it helps. It really does. Makes the burnishing portion a lot easier. All right. Go. All right, so now we move to my garage where I have my Dremel with my burnisher, which makes life a whole lot easier. All right, so now we're outside in my garage, my very messy one. And now we're going to burnish this. I have this burnishing edge on my Dremel. It's set to about half speed, and all that I'm going to do is take sponge with water, wet the edges, turn on the Dremel. It's going to get loud. want to go until you see a nice shine on this. You can see it's shiny now, and that means it's nice and burnished and ready to go. So I'm just adding water to the edge. This just want to slick down all the loose fibers. Some people use oils. Pull off this little strand right there. A lot of different things, but water works great. Still need to go a little bit further. Getting dry. Adding more water. That's all it takes. You can see all my edges are nice and smooth, a little bit darker now because that's applied heat from friction. And it's nice and smooth, ready to go. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and sew a border all the way around my cover. You want to start in this area so your double stitch will be hidden by the buckle. Grab my tails, put down my feed dogs. Put down my foot. I don't know why I said feed dogs. All right. Now I am going to start by just getting it into the leather by hand, holding the feet, holding the tails, and keeping pressure against the guide as I sew. And as I come into the turn, I'm going to go to hand. Just be very precise. And you want to make your turn right as the needle is coming up. Lift your foot a little bit, give it a turn, lower it down. Let it go in. Start as it comes up. Lift it up, give it a turn. Down. As soon as it starts coming up, lift it up, give it a turn. As it starts coming up, lift, give it a turn to get it right back where it needs to be. At this point, I cut off my extra tails. I'm good to keep going. Start going into the turn, and a little bit up, give it a little turn, and starts to come up, pressure off the foot, give it a turn. And starts to come up, pressure off, give it a turn, and coming up, pressure off, finish the turn. Up, pressure off, give it a little bit of a turn, up there, in, pressure up, give it a turn, pressure off, give it a turn. Starts to come up, pressure off, give it a turn. I just realized my first few stitches didn't go through. Everything else looks good, so I'm gonna back it up and hand go over these holes again, just to make sure that I get all that. It's unfortunate, but a missed stitch happens every now and then. Most likely this occurred from my not having the machine perfectly timed. Now, since I have this mistake area, I'm going to be a little more careful with what I do. So as I come up to this area right in here, I am going to have to, right when I get here, lift this up and manually put the needle in the hole. That way they are going to be in the same exact holes, so I can fix this without having any issue. So now I'm coming up into the area, and I had string is something happened with my string. So you're gonna see me have to do some fixing. So I'm gonna go ahead and back this up, pull this out, get past the thread that trying to break. And what I am going to do is I'm just going to cut this, just checking to make sure I didn't have any other major issues. No, it's just this. Something is going on with my tension, so I'm gonna have to do some adjusting for my next one, but nothing catastrophic, nothing that can't be fixed. So all that I am doing is I am cutting away the bad area. Rid of all the bad thread. I may just need to go to a larger needle or something if it's the needle. It looks like my thread got shredded. Generally that means that I have a mismatch on my needle size to my thread size. So I can go up to a larger needle or go down to a smaller thread. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start my stitch right here, and I'm just going to manually place each line in all the way around until I get here. just gonna go to that hole, make sure it starts to go in, put down my feed, and now I'm just gonna guide each stitch into the next hole. So that one didn't even stitch. Let me try again. Nope, still didn't want to stitch. Maybe I have a bigger issue than I thought. Go. Just making sure the needle's going in the holes each time. I'm just hand cranking this and moving the leather as needed, just to make sure the needle's going directly into that hole. This is where I started, so I just got to line up that hole again. There we go. Once you get going, generally all the holes will line up. These are not wanting to line up for some reason, so I'm just going to have to move the leather each time. So now I'm back into where we already have string. So these are going to become my lock stitches. I usually like going through 3 holes just to be safe that there's no fraying that's gonna happen. So you can see, even though I had the mistake, since I fed it back through all the holes, there shouldn't be any missed spots. And it looks pretty good. So you just want to trim off your excess. And then you use a lighter. Not sure where I put it. There it is. And then you just want to use your lighter to melt the ends. Okay, and that's all stitched. Alright, so now that we have the stitching done, see it went all the way around, everything looks pretty good. So, I have a few blemishes I'm going to try and erase. My eraser. Whatever doesn't come off, it's okay, because leather isn't perfect. It's not meant to be perfect. These little dark spots and marks are on all hides. You want to be more careful if you don't want that kind of stuff, to make sure that you are picking a section of your hide that has the least amount of blemishes. But since this is just a practice one, just to get myself going again, I'm not too worried about that. All right. So now I need to attach my buckles. So one side is going to be the front, one side is going to be the back. Now, since this side has the blemishes, you can see there's a dark spot there and a dark spot there. I'm going to make that the back. And this, which is pretty much blemish free, is going to be my front. So you want your buckle to be on the front, the strap to be on the back. So, I just attached these with some brass rivets. There are 2 sides, one with the stem, one with the cap. When these go on and you hammer them, they pop into place and they squish down, and this stem flattens out inside of this one, locking them in place. So, to attach, it's very simple. All that I do is I flip this over, take the ones with the stems, stick them through my holes. 1, 2, and 3. So now I have 3 stems sticking up. This is going to be my front, so I'm going to take my buckle. I'm going to decide which one I want to be up. I think I want it like this. Then set this down. Feed those stems through the holes I made. Sometimes easier said than done. The last one's wanting to fight me. There we go. So now all of those are coming up. You take your caps, 1. 2. The buckle can kind of get in your way sometimes, so you just gotta move it around till it's good. 3. And then what you want to do is you want to take a hammer and just tap them in place. You don't want to hit it too hard because you can over and flatten them out. You want them to be on there, but not too tight. So now this is good to go. The buckle's on there and it's not going anywhere. It's all good. You can kind of see. Let me see if I can show you. Those are in there. They're nice and flat. There's no wiggle, so that one's good. Now I'm going to go ahead and do this one. Need 3 stems. Stick them through. Stems are up. They want this way to be up. Feed them through your holes. Seems that I have these misaligned a little bit, but the good thing about leather is it stretches. And you just want to make sure that's not going anywhere. And it's good. All right. I feel like these are a little crooked, so I'm just going to tap them from this side a little bit. There we go. Now they're much more flush. So, now here's the real test. Composition notebook. Oops, it's backwards. Much easier. This one's got stuck on the rivets. There we go. Fits nice. Strap holds. Now there's one last thing that you can do. So you can either, got a little misstitch there, oh well. You can either dye this. This is a black dye, I have brown dye, or you can leave it natural. And whatever you're doing, I usually end by putting some leather cream or oil on it just to give it a little extra protection. So I have this. This is boot dressing. I got it from Tandy's. It was on sale. It's basically just the end of beeswax and mink oil, which are good for conditioning and softening and making the leather a little more pliable and making it a little more waterproof because of the oils. Just want to take this. Take a nice amount of it, and you just want to spread it all. Work it into every little bit. See, it's kind of stopped. I'm kind of out. Grab a little bit. Make sure you get the sides and the straps. Get underneath the straps. Sorry if that's been out of focus. Just applying mink oil everywhere. Looks like I had a little glue there, which you can always still erase and put more oil on. And this just conditions and protects the leather. The edge is good. There we go. And it is a finished journal cover. This will dry and get less streaky. This little spire here has some glue on it. Once it's dry, I can get that off. But that is how you make a leather composition notebook cover. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, like, subscribe, and set up for notifications so you can get all the new videos that I make on how to make all sorts of stuff, including my next video on how to make a leather, oops, wrong side, card holder for spell books and whatnot. This prototype, I'll show you how to make the real thing.